Hello, I am Steve Wood, and welcome to Luke 21. Thanks for joining me as we study biblical prophecy. We have a really important one today. We're going to look at the connection between St. Michael, the archangel, and Pope Leo XIII. These two have an intimate connection that's really important for understanding how biblical prophecy may relate to our very day. Let's have a quick review of where we are. In our last episode, we surveyed Daniel 10, 11, and 12 and saw how St. Michael was the restrainer and protector of God's people that's also mentioned in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. So today, we're going to take that and take it just a step further. Right before the second coming, there's a radical transition in history that you have this long span of Christian history ever since Christ ascended into heaven, the first coming of Christ, until shortly before the second coming. There's a restraint. That's the restrainer that Daniel was talking about, 2 Thessalonians 2 is talking about. But right before the second coming, the period before the second coming, there's a radical change that takes place in history as the restraint in evil is removed, and evil then becomes a dominating influence in the world. As a result, there's persecution of Christians and tribulation. Those verses, let me read again from 2 Thessalonians 2, verses 6 and 7. And you know what is restraining him now, so that he may be revealed in his time. For the mystery of lawlessness is already at work. Only he who now restrains it will do so until he is taken out of the way. And then the lawless one, that's the Antichrist, will be revealed, and the Lord Jesus will slay him with the breath of his mouth, and destroy him by his appearing and his coming, his second coming. So these are the events preceding the second coming of Christ. Now today we're going to try to build a second connection. We connected Daniel 10, 11, and 12 with 2 Thessalonians 2. There's another very important chapter of the Bible for understanding biblical prophecy that also connects with 2 Thessalonians 2. And that's Revelation chapter 20. In fact, if you understand Revelation chapter 20, you might be well on your way to understanding the entire book of Revelation. But Revelation 20 we'll call a cousin chapter to 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. And what do we find in the book of Revelation chapter 20? We find this. Then I saw an angel coming down from heaven, holding in his hand a key of the bottomless pit and a great chain. Now, these are the instruments of restraining that St. Paul is talking about in 2 Thessalonians 2. And he seized the dragon, the ancient serpent, who is the devil and Satan, and bound or restrained him for 1,000 years. That's a long age of the church. Now, in verse 3, he threw him into the pit and shut it and sealed it over him for the purpose that he should deceive the nations no more till the 1,000 years were ended. After that, here's the transition. After that, he must be loosed or unrestrained for a little while, and that's prior to the second coming. Now, if you get this, it took me quite a few years to get this with clarity. You're connecting Daniel, 2 Thessalonians 2, and Revelation 20. We're basically talking about the same thing using different backdrops in these three passages and different imagery, but this is the same event. And this event, towards the end of history, so you have a long period, 1,000 years is a symbolic number in Revelation. People say, well, you don't take the Bible literally. It's nearly impossible to take the numbers literally, or so many other things in the book of Revelation, because these numbers are symbolic for what? You have repetitions of the number 7. That's the number of perfection. So St. John uses over and over and over again in the book of Revelation the number 7. 1,000 is just saying a long stretch. And the devil will be restrained. Even though he was restrained, when St. Paul wrote 2 Thessalonians 2, it would be for a long period. He would be restrained from having dominance over the earth, as he did have before the coming of Christ. But for a short period of time, relative to the long period of the church age, for a short period of time prior to the second coming, he'll be released. And you'll have an immediate reversion worldwide, throughout the nations of the world, a reversion to evil. And it's, in many ways, it will be worse than paganism, because to know Christ and to know and have the influence of Christianity and to turn your back on it, to go back to the pagan world, it'll be a darker darkness than the pagan world had. What's really remarkable is something that happened on October 13th, 1884. Pope Leo XIII had just completed saying Mass in St. Peter's, and as he was walking out, the people around him thought he was having a heart attack, because he more or less froze, and the blood just drained from his face, and they were very concerned for his health. He wasn't having a health crisis. What he was having was a vision of Satan asking God permission to have free reign against the church and in the world, and that he could basically win the world to himself. And when he was asking for a certain period of time, many think it would have been a century or roughly thereafter. What I found incredibly important in becoming a Catholic and discovering the St. Michael the Archangel prayer, which Pope Leo XIII just told everybody, leave me alone. He went in a private room and composed the St. Michael the Archangel prayer immediately following this. He was connecting this apocalyptic vision that he had to St. Michael. And what Catholics very frequently say today, the St. Michael the Archangel prayer, is a highly abbreviated form of what the prayer Pope Leo XIII initially wrote. It's much longer. It's called the long form of the St. Michael the Archangel prayer. And I caution people, this isn't a prayer for laity. If you're not an exorcist and know what you're doing and trained, this is too high octane. This is an exorcism prayer of Satan from the world, and you'll be getting in over your head unless you're an exorcist to pray this prayer. But what I found so remarkable is, having studied the book of Revelation for so long and basically seeing what was going on here and understanding this period, that again, when I was into the rapture theory, this period would be like some 1,000 years in the future. You just blew it off. You didn't pay any attention to it. Whereas in the Catholic understanding and the historic Protestant understanding and St. Augustine's understanding, this is current events that happen prior to the second coming of Christ. It's not something that happens long after the second coming of Christ. So in a sense, it's very eye-opening. And what's so fascinating is that the long form of the St. Michael the Archangel prayer follows the outline specifically of Revelation chapter 20. I'll just read you some parts of it. It begins with this: that cruel, that ancient serpent who is called the devil or Satan, who seduces the whole world, was cast into the abyss with his angels. Okay, was cast, past tense. This is Revelation 20, verses 1 and 2. Then he says, behold, this primeval enemy and slayer of men has taken courage. Transformed into an angel of light, he wanders about with all the multitude of wicked spirits, invading the earth. This is current news, present tense. In order to blot out the name of God and of his Christ, to seize upon, slay, and cast into eternal perdition souls destined for the crown of glory. This wicked dragon pours out as a most impure flood the venom of his malice on men, and his pestilential breath of impurity and of every vice and iniquity. That's the second half of Revelation 20, verse 3. You see what's going on? Revelation 21 and 2, Revelation 20, the second half of verse 3. And then there's a final petition. There's actually in a whole other paragraph I'm going to skip, but just know that the target of this period, this short period where the devil is unrestrained, the target besides this worldwide attack is the Catholic Church. It's the bullseye, and it's going to go right for the papacy and the Catholic Church. So just be aware. Don't be surprised if there's some attacks going on during this period. And then there's the final petition. Oh, pray to the God of peace that he may put Satan under our feet, so far conquered that he may no longer be able to hold men in captivity and harm the church. And beating down the dragon, the ancient serpent, who is the devil and Satan, do thou again make him captive in the abyss, that he may no longer seduce the nations. And that's exactly how Revelation 20 then proceeds. So let's add this up. I can't emphasize enough the importance of our previous episode, that was 429, where we saw Daniel 10 and 11 and 12, St. Paul was using to teach the Thessalonians about this period of history. But God gave Pope Leo XIII a vision of that very critical period in history, the transition before the second coming, when St. Michael stands aside, as we saw in Daniel 12:1, and the devil then is unrestrained, and evil again dominates the world with incredible power and speed, but it's a relatively brief time before the second coming of Christ. And the Catholic Catechism says in section 677, the Church will enter the glory of the kingdom only through this final Passover, this final unleashing of evil. And the scripture references for that are Revelation 13 and Revelation 20. So let's put it together. We're having St. Michael the Archangel. We're having the vision of Pope Leo XIII. We're having the teaching of St. John in Revelation 20 and the teaching of St. Paul in 2 Thessalonians 2 of a prophetic warning of that time, that little season when Satan is no longer restrained, preceding the second coming of Christ. I believe that St. Leo XIII's vision alerts us to that time is very probably now. He who has ears to hear, let him hear.